thank you for coming out on the busy weekday, and we're grateful for each of you being here. I'm really excited and happy and grateful, and for my wife Mary. I love her very much, and it just lifts up my spirits and the campaign spirits when she's around. And she can't always be on the campaign trail because we have two teenage daughters. One is 18 and one is 15. One of them drives, and they both like boys. And so, you know what I'm talking about, right? And they need parental supervision. So Mary shuttles back and forth between the campaign trail and our house, and I'm really, really grateful that she's with, and she's been with us last week and this week, and hopefully on many future trips to Iowa as well. Now, I love coming to Iowa for lots of different reasons. There's a lot of similarities between Iowa and Minnesota, and one of those similarities is Iowa is one of the few places in the country besides Minnesota where I can tell my corny Ole and Lena jokes, and people still get them and understand them and appreciate them. So, of course, you heard about the relationship problems that Ole and Lena were having. They were bickering with each other. They were arguing with each other. Their relationship was kind of deteriorating. And so Ole, like any good Midwesterner, decided to go see a counselor. And he goes and sees the counselor and is telling the counselor about the problems in the relationship and the bickering and the arguing, and the counselor says, "Oh, Ole, my goodness, I can fix that easily. All you need to do is clear your head and get some exercise. What I want you to do, Ole, is I want you to walk 2 miles every day for 2 weeks, 14 days, and things will be better." And Ole says, "Okay, I will." And so the 2 weeks goes by, and the counselor decides to check in on Ole. He picks up his phone. He calls Ole. He says, "Ole, how are things going?" And Ole's on his cell phone. And Ole says, "Well, how would I know how they're going with Lena? I'm 28 miles away from home." So I share that with you because it's just a little story about drifting away from home, drifting away from the things that we know matter most, and that's what's happening to our country. And of course, we've got great challenges, and America's in big trouble. And I'm running for President of the United States because I've got the leadership and the skill and the experience and the values and the judgment to lead this country to a better place. Now, before we talk about going forward, it's important to talk about how we got here. And how we got here, in part, is we allowed the Democrats, starting in Iowa, but then more broadly across the country, to put somebody in the Oval Office as President of the United States who wasn't well equipped or well prepared for the job, and had a very dangerous and misguided worldview and direction for America. Now, you'll remember this is somebody who was a community organizer, Barack Obama. He was somebody who was a college professor. He was in the U.S. Senate long enough to have a cup of coffee before it got cold. And then we put him in the Oval Office as President of the United States and leader of the free world, and wonder why it's not working. I think Iowa should expect, and America should expect, that the next president in these most historically challenging times is actually going to have run something. Something that's large, that's a big enterprise, that has a public component to it, and driven it to success. Barack Obama doesn't have that, didn't have that. And we learned that lesson. We learned some other lessons as well. And that is when the elixir salesman comes through town, or woman comes through town, and is promising the magic of the elixir, don't buy it. Because you need to make sure that we have it proven on results, not based on fancy rhetoric, not based on fancy speeches, not based on the soaring, incredible presentations that he made in 2008. What we now know is none of it rang true. None of it was right for America. He made the big promises. So this isn't about more speeches. It's not about more fancy talk. It's about rolling up our sleeves and putting our shoulders back and our head down and getting this country fixed and back on the right track. And we know what works, and we know what doesn't work. And what doesn't work is Barack Obama's idea that we're going to have central planning. What does work is freedom and free markets and free enterprise and individual responsibility and understanding the values and foundations of this country economically and morally, and bringing those forward to the challenges of our time and leading with conviction and strength in that direction. Now, this president also made a lot of promises to people. You look the American people in the eye, made a long list of promises about what he was going to do when he was president. Including when he stood in Iowa and said, "You know, when I'm president, I'm going to reform the healthcare system. I'm going to do it with Republicans. I'm going to focus on cost containment." And do you remember when he was a candidate, he was opposed to the individual mandate? Hillary Clinton was for it. Barack Obama was against it. And then he went to Washington, D.C. and did just the opposite. And he jammed down the throats of the nation one of the most misguided pieces of legislation in the modern history of the country. Obamacare should be repealed in its entirety. Amen. But he did some other things. Broke his promises as well. Now you know we're drowning in debt and deficit. It's obvious, it's plain for all to see. But in March of 2009, when he was President of the United States, after he saw the fall of the economy, after he knew the magnitude of the problem we were facing, he said, in my first term, I will cut the budget deficit in half. He didn't cut it in half. He tripled it. And then the list goes on, but I'll give you one more out of many. You know, then he says the economy's in trouble, and he proposes this government pork-filled, ridiculous stimulus bill. And then he says, if you don't pass it, unemployment could go all the way up to 8%. Well, they passed it, and unemployment didn't go to 8%, it went to 10%. So we have a leader who not only was ill-prepared for the job, he not only gave us the elixir salesman pitch that the Democrats unfortunately bought, including in Iowa. He not only had all the rhetoric of promises that he broke and was unfulfilled, but now he continues to hide and duck and bob and weave on the major challenges facing the country. Now you know we've got this big spending and deficit and debt challenge, and we shouldn't have to play come out wherever you are with the President of the United States. He has an obligation and responsibility to lead in detail with specifics on the major challenges facing the nation. And one of the major challenges facing this nation is how are we going to get our spending under control? How are we going to reform our spending? And I'm going to offer a prize to you this morning. If anyone in this room can find President Obama's specific proposal on how to reform Social Security, or how to reform Medicaid, or how to reform Medicare in detail and in public that he's presented it, I will mow your lawn. Or it's limited to 1 acre, by the way. So, no, you can think of it. Or, if you prefer, I will cook you dinner, menu of my choice. Or if you play hockey, I'll have a pickup hockey game and guarantee that you'll score and be showcased in the scoring column. So your choice. But if you can find me any of his actual proposals, I will give you that prize. We're having a sweepstakes. It's called Find the President's Leadership, or alternatively named Come Out, Mr. President, wherever you are, on leadership and specifics on these things. Now, a couple other things, obviously. If you're going to be President of the United States, people want to not just know about the criticisms that you lob or the concerns that you lob against President Obama. We also have to present our own ideas and our own vision for America. And then I want to leave the bulk of the time for questions, but let me give you a few things that I think we're going to have to focus on most importantly and urgently. Number one, we got to get the economy moving. And the way to get it moving isn't to grow the government. We're going to grow the private economy by shrinking government. Now, we have a lot of work to do in that regard, and I gave the most specific, most aggressive, most bold, pro-growth, pro-job, pro-investment, pro-economic development speech of any candidate in the race by far, including the President. We went to his former place of employment, the University of Chicago, and gave the speech a few weeks ago. The whole thing is online at our website, timpawlenty.com, but here are the highlights. Cut the business tax rates in this country from 35% down to 15%. Make it from world lagging to world leading in that regard. But it comes with a catch. Then also clean out as many of the special deals, exemptions, credits, deductions, loopholes as possible, so that businesses' ability to compete in the marketplace depends on their ability to connect to customers, not their ability to connect to members of Congress and lobbyists. And so we'll have a flat business tax system with all of the cronyism, special deals. You know how it works now. You got a lot of these companies, they don't pay the 35% rate, nothing close to it, because they get all these special deals, and if they got the right connections in Congress, their business, their entity, their industry gets a little credit, a deduction, or whatever. So let's lower the rate for everybody, have a level playing field, and get the cronyism and the politics out of the tax code. Let's have the individual rates go from 6 rates down to 2. Let's do the hard work of making regulations more job-friendly and more investment-friendly. And what I mean by that is a number of things, but here's a few of them. When any new regulation must go into effect, and I hope they don't, but when they do, let's sunset them so they can only last for 3 or 5 years. Let's not have them go on forever. And then before they do go into final effect, you know how it works now? Congress passes a law, they kick it out to the bureaucracy to do the regulations, to kind of fill in the details. But the bureaucrats who have the final say on the details, they're not elected. They don't listen to average people like you and me. They don't say, well, somebody called me from Jefferson, Iowa, I guess I'll change this idea, even though this person really knows what they're talking about. Most of the time, the citizens just get the stiff arm on that deal once it gets into the bureaucracy. So let's force these regulations to come back to Congress for a final up or down vote, so real people with real information and real experience who actually know what they're talking about can connect one more time with their elected representatives before these regulations are dumped on their head. I think that's really important. We need to have a better energy policy for America. And I can summarize my policy in 3 words: more American energy. I'm sick of having our future tied to the Middle East and people that don't like us and want to do us great harm. And the main way we're going to stabilize and reduce energy prices is to create more supply, right? And so that means drilling in ANWR. That means more offshore deep water drilling, learning the lessons of the Gulf oil spill. That means taking advantage with the cleanest technology that we have available of the 250-year supply of coal in America. That means using the best technology we have available, but advancing nuclear energy. That means using the massive, massive amount of natural gas we have now found in the United States, enough to power the entire baseload energy of the country for 75, 100 or more years. And it also means doing the renewable energy that makes sense. But then I want to tell you the basic message I hear all across this country when it comes to jobs is this: Governor, get the government off my back. Get the government off my back. And some talk about taxes, and some talk about regulation, and some talk about litigation, and some talk about insurance costs, and some talk about energy costs and healthcare costs and the like. The basic message is the load is too heavy. It needs to be lighter. You're doing things to discourage me. The federal government is. You should do things to encourage me. Now look, every politician is going to come through town and they're going to say, hey, I'm the pro-jobs mayor, I'm the pro-jobs legislator, I'm the pro-jobs governor, I'm the pro-jobs candidate. And they all flap their jaw, but I want you to make a distinction between our team and the folks on the other side of the aisle. The other side of the aisle has pretty confused. You know, they say they're pro-jobs, but you can't be pro-jobs and anti-business. That's like being, you know, pro-egg and anti-chicken. I mean, that doesn't work. So don't listen to that. I mean, it makes no sense at all. Now, I want to close and tell you there's a lot of issues, and I didn't cover all of them, obviously, but I hope we can get into it in questions. But look, you folks are bottom line people. You just want to get to the real deal. And here's the real deal. Every Republican candidate for president, or most of them, is going to come into this room or a room like it across Iowa, and they're going to say many of the same things. They're going to look at you and say, look, I'm for reducing spending in government. I'm for reducing taxes. I'm for school reform the right way through parental empowerment and local control, accountability for results. They're going to say they're pro-life. They're going to say they're pro-traditional marriage. They're going to say they are in favor of no activist judges and making sure we put strict constructionists on the courts. They're going to say they're for immigration reform. They're going to say they're for litigation reform, and on down the list. So the question you might want to ask is, as you listen to all that, you're going to say, gosh, these candidates all sound pretty similar. You know, what's really the difference? Well, any bobblehead can stand up here and, you know, and say the right words as a Republican candidate. I think an important question for you as you consider who to vote for in the Ames straw poll or the caucuses or beyond is, has this person actually done any of it? Because after Barack Obama, I'm sick and tired of listening to people flap their jaw. I want to know, can you get it done? Do you have real experience? Have you led to results? So this isn't about more speeches. It's not about more fancy rhetoric. It's not about selling elixir. This is about fixing our country. And it's going to take real leaders with real experience, with real results. So we're driving around Iowa 1,100 miles last week and about the same this week, with the theme being Road to Results. And that's why this banner says, results, not rhetoric. Because anybody can stand up here and give you the words. The question is, can you do it? And have you done it? So that's number one. If you look at my record in Minnesota, what you'll see is I took spending from historic highs to historic lows. I cut taxes net over my 8 years as governor, even though we had the effects of 2 recessions. We were one of the first states to implement not seniority pay for teachers, but performance pay for teachers, and offer it statewide. I actually appointed, for the first time in the modern history, and maybe the whole history of the state of Minnesota, a majority of justices on the Minnesota Supreme Court who are conservative and who will apply the law as written instead of putting their personal or political views in there. I also was the person who presided over the most significant drop in abortions in Minnesota history. I was written up by the National Review Online recently, which is a conservative publication, saying based on results, not rhetoric, that I'm probably the most pro-life candidate in the race. When I was in the Minnesota legislature, I co-authored the Defense of Marriage Act. We did public employee pension and benefit reform in Minnesota under my leadership before it was the cool and popular thing to do across the country. And we did immigration reform, and on down the list. The point I want to leave you with is there's a big difference between flapping your jaw and shooting your mouth off and getting it done. And I got it done as governor, and I will for America. Now, one last thing on the spending issue. I probably cut more spending out of budgets than anybody in the country, I think, at least as a governor in my time. So I got a little experience doing this. And I shut down government for the first time in 150 years. I set a record for vetoes in Minnesota. I took more money out of the budget using executive authority during my 8 years as governor than all the other 142 years worth of governors combined. So I know a bit about cutting government spending. But I've come to the point where I don't really believe anymore that we can trust most politicians to go to Washington, D.C. and do the right thing when it comes to financial discipline and living within the government's means. So I think we've got to put up the congressional and financial equivalent of silent fencing for politicians. You know how you have silent fencing in your yard? I shouldn't say refer it to like dogs, but I mean, you hit the boundary long enough, the silent fence long enough, and you get zapped and you know not to go to past the boundary. We need to put up some boundaries for our members of Congress. I don't believe anymore that they're just going to go out there and do the right thing after watching this for a long time. So that's why I strongly support, I believe one of the best things we can do for our country going forward is to propose and pass and demand a constitutional amendment to balance the federal budget. I'll close with that and take your questions, but I want to thank Chip Baltimore for his service and friendship and support. He is a fantastic individual. I got to know him, not just in terms of his policy, but him as a person and the integrity and the values that he has, not just up here, but here. It matters a lot. And Chip, I know you're going to represent this area well, and you've done a great job, and you're a great friend. I appreciate that. My good friend, Leader Helen, who is I think out on the sidewalk, we appreciate him and his service in the Iowa legislature. But look, the way forward may not be easy, but it's not complex. This isn't rocket science. We know what made this country great. We can look back at the chapters of success of the United States of America and harvest the values and principles and things that were the ingredients to our success. If we bring them forward with conviction and strength and carry them forward in leadership in the country, this will remain the greatest nation in the world. And we're not the greatest nation because we're the biggest nation in terms of population. We're not. We're not the greatest nation in the world because we're the cheapest nation. We're not, although we need to be more competitive. We're the greatest nation in the world because we're the freest people in the world. And when people are free, They can speak as they see fit. They can create as they see fit. They can design and dream as they see fit. They can innovate and invent, and they can worship and associate and have all the dynamic qualities and unleash the human potential when they're free. But when government comes into our life like they've been doing, and they weigh us down, and they make it more expensive, and they make it more slow, and they make it more difficult, and they make it more uncertain, and they make it more discouraging, or worse yet, they take over more and more of our lives in family and in business and in private markets and in charity and the like, they not only grow their footprint, they not only grow their budgets, they do something else. They weigh down and diminish and discourage the American spirit. We got a lot of discouraged people across the country. You know that. You see that. And we know what needs to be done. Again, it may not be easy, but it's not complex. What we really need to do is tell the government that they work for us. We don't work for them. We tell them what to do. They don't tell us what to do. I need your help. The Ames Straw Poll is going to be a big event. I know it's a little bit of a drive, but not too bad. And we'd love to have you there supporting our campaign. If you haven't signed up on the website, there's postcards that'll be in the back on your way out after the question period. We'll get you there if you need a ride. We'll get you tickets. We'll make it easy. We'll make it fun. But this is a really important day for Iowa. You don't want to just be first. You want to be right. We got to have a candidate first and foremost that can unite the whole Republican Party. The first step on the journey is a united conservative movement. The conservative movement consists of economic conservatives and social conservatives and Tea Party types and libertarian types. One person can be more than one of those things, but if we have a candidate who primarily appeals to one chunk of that but not all of it, we're not going to be on the road to success. I've got the record to authentically and genuinely appeal to the whole conservative movement and unite it. And then we need some other things. We need somebody who can actually be the nominee. We need somebody who can actually beat Barack Obama in purple and blue places. And by the way, everybody's going to say they can do it. I did. Got elected and re-elected in Minnesota. Not exactly an easy place. And then lastly, we need somebody who can function and has the skill and the ability and the experience to be President of the United States. And the American people are going to expect, and Iowa should expect, that that person actually have run something large before you put him or her in there. And to have the experience and the judgment and the results to be the leader of the free world, the Commander-in-Chief and President of the United States. I have that kind of experience, and I look forward to leading this country to a better place. Thank you, and I'll take it.